Lastly, we're going to look at another artist, Botticelli, who also works for the Medici, who, as you've learned, are from Republican city. They're from Florence, although they have aspirations to be like the aristocrats of the northern courts. And they use their artists, who they teach or utilize their knowledge of classical literature and classical forms to bolster their own elite status, and that's essentially the court style. I'll begin with this kind of easy painting of Venus and Mars. It's not as if Botticelli, or in this case the patrons are the Vespucci family, it's not as if they actually believed in classical mythological figures like the existence of Venus and Mars, but rather they are taking them, they're using them, they're making allegories out of them by, creating these visual narratives in which the two characters interact, again, creating a kind of intellectual puzzle that is the style, that is the hallmark of courtly art. So in any event, as you might be able to see here, here's Venus. She is married to another mythological figure according to the she's married to Vulcan, but she has an affair with Mars, and Mars in this case, post-coitus, Mars is knocked out, and all these little kind of small satyrs are inhabiting his armor. So in any event, this is a puzzle that we need to tease out. I hope it's pretty obvious, and that is that Venus, who here is a symbol of love, has managed to take down or to knock out war. So love conquers war, and that is the meaning. That is an easy way to understand how it is that these artists and their patrons are using classical antiquity. Now, we won't be able to go in depth about the Medici in this class, which makes me really sad, but I do want to introduce you to them. There are three generations, and the oldest and the youngest generation are the biggest patrons of art. This is a painting. It was actually done for this guy here, Mr. Lama. He wanted to create a painting of the Adoration of the Magi, which is, a biblical subject. But instead of the kings, the three Magi, he puts in portraits of the three generations of the Medici. So we have the oldest, Cosimo de' Medici, as the oldest of the three kings, of the three Magi. And then we have essentially two more generations, Piero the Gaudi, who's actually not that well renowned. Cosimo, for example, was known for his patronage of Donatello. Piero the Gaudi also patronized art, but we tend to think of Lorenzo, the grandson, as the one most associated with Botticelli, for example. But anyway, these are their pictures, just so, their portraits, just so you can see that. And here, by the way, is Botticelli. He's put his own little face in the crowd there at the Adoration of the Magi as well. Now, the one painting I want to talk about is this one. It is the Primavera. You probably have seen it before. And it is, the perfect example of the use of classical knowledge to create an allegory about, things that would be of interest to an elite culture. I'm going to go through these figures and explain what I think one art historian's interpretation of the image, and that is that these 9 figures in total, 9 is a good dinner party, one of the Renaissance theorists tells us, and that in total these figures tell us something about the nature of earthly or profane love. And again, these are all classical mythological figures. I've labeled them here at the bottom, but in this picture you can see the blue wind, Zephyr, who is impregnating this woman. He's chasing after and impregnating this woman who is Clara. And again, these are characters in classical literature. And by that interaction, they produce their child is Flora. And in fact, out of Clara's mouth comes spilling these flowers that occupy the dress of Flora. And in turn, those flowers are sort of falling down onto the ground in this beautiful garden. At the center of the composition is Springtime herself, Primavera, who looks a lot like Venus, and in fact some people think she is Venus, and above her is Cupid. So we move from these very, um, reproductive aspects of love to springtime. And springtime, our eye moves then up here to Cupid, who is shooting an arrow down to this group of ladies, also from classical literature. They are the Three Graces, and they are known for being the epitome of a kind of secular love, the love between people. One of the figures is known, and here you have to look at their hand gestures. One is known for being the person who gives totally. That's this one. The other, I'm sorry, that's this one. In her hand gestures, she is giving. This one receives with both her hands. And this one is a mix of giving and receiving. And so in total, they are seen as an allegory for the nature of love. And then this character at the end, Mercury. Mercury, as you probably know, is the go-between god between mortals and the divine, Zeus in this case. And he stands here at the end of this group of, again, very secular kinds of love. And he is stirring up, and Mercury has these little winged boots, and in any event, he's stirring up the heavens as if, this kind of secular love that is reproduced here, again, reproductive love, romantic love, just sort of the nature of the give and take in love, that he's stirring that up because it has some connection to the divine. And indeed, there is a second painting by Botticelli, which is this one, and I'll just move it here. It's a second painting. And it's different, but the two were intended to go together, although they're different sizes, which is a bit of a problem. But anyway, they're intended to go together, as you can see, and after Mercury kind of invokes the divine after this secular love, there is a representation of the purity of love itself. So the same woman, Venus here shown naked, and naked here being kind of a sense of purity. The two pairings here of the pairing here of Zephyr and Chlora, they're now intermeshed as if one. Again, a kind of sense of a more divine love that is different from the profane love that is represented here. So in any event, this is what's going on in the court culture in the northern Italian cities, but also in Florence under the Medici, and particularly under Lorenzo de' Medici, whose cousin commissions this, but nonetheless who is behind Botticelli, creating such really dense intellectual, puzzly types of works of art.